Guess what, everybody? It's time for another conversation with another stranger. This show has been incredible. More so, maybe for me than anybody else, but I think people are getting benefit from it. But what's fascinating to me is that 15 seconds ago, I had no idea my guest even existed. I mean, he existed as an appointment on my calendar that he had made some time ago, or however long ago he did, but I had no idea who he is. And I love what happens in this magical room called the Zoom room, where two complete strangers walk in together or sit in together or do whatever they do. Sit in I like because that's from the 60s when I used to do sit ins and protests. But we sit together here in this room and we see what happens. So if you're game, I'm game. And together we're going to meet somebody by the name of Pete Lonton. His brand name is Mighty Pete, but we're gonna just call him Pete right now for our show. And Pete, I just want to thank you for coming, showing up, being here with us, and I want to ask you how you're doing today.
I'm doing mighty well, thank you.
Mighty
It's
well. There's the brand coming in.
well, listen, what a way to start, Listen, and I thank you for that kind introduction. And yeah, I put that in front of my name to remind myself that I am mighty, I can be mighty, and it's my duty to be mighty. So, that's not to stand on a pedestal and say, "Look at me." It's a reminder to myself more than anything else,
And
And
why do you have to remind yourself that you're mighty?
Well, I had 37 and a half years of being what I would call normal or average. And unfortunately, normal and average, whilst is good and I've achieved a lot in my life and it's been great and I'm very fortunate. I think I was doing so pretty much unconsciously, pretty much in autopilot. And I couldn't have told you what I wanted and what my purpose was or, why I was here. And it kind of took a pretty, a extreme set of circumstances to bring me to a dark place, really, that led me to say, well, hold on a minute, and I don't know if it's an age thing. I don't know whether if it's a point in your life or circumstance, but when you eventually, it's a bit like a washing machine. It's all well and good until it starts to fall apart, and then, it kind of gets a bit rickety, and you think the thing's going to take off, and that's kind of the way my life was going, and stuff was going on around me. And at the time I was looking at things around me and other people and saying, how is it that they're achieving, in my perception, they're achieving more or doing it differently, and yet here's me working as hard, if not harder, than anyone else I knew, and going all this, but yet I wasn't necessarily moving forward at the right pace, and I didn't feel right within myself.
Got it.
And really at that point I said that no, that's, we've got to change and we've got to step back. And that's the point. I said, we need to shift gear here. We need to do something different. And really the last sort of 3.5 years has been me just trying to do that, shift gear, and being open to say, I know that I don't know, and listening and trying to, find out more. And that's kind of where it's led me to today, is, having a random conversation with the likes of yourself is like, what an amazing opportunity, really, So that's a little bit about me.
I love that. So can I unpack that a little bit with you?
Sure, sure.
Um, First of all, for those of you who are listening, I want you to know that I've never had a conversation with Pete. We've never had a conversation, right? We've never even emailed each other. We maybe just texted, this is how you get on the Zoom room, right?
Correct. Yep.
I want you to see how beautifully open this man is. Within the first minute and a half of our conversation, talking to an imperfect stranger like myself, he can be so vulnerable and so real and so honest. And I want to ask you, not you, Pete, but I want to ask people that are listening, what are the walls that you're standing behind that prevent you from doing that? What are the places where you don't allow yourself to be seen? And look what happened when Pete just did. Could you feel the whole show sort of shift a little to become a little more real? And what's interesting to me, if I can I push you a little?
Sure, please do.
If any of this doesn't make sense, throw it in the trash can and just say, I don't, that's, I'm putting it in the trash can. I don't want to talk about it. Okay.
Sure.
What I find is you gave a beautifully vulnerable, raw, real answer to why you put mighty in front of your name. When really what it felt to me like you were saying is that you've lived a normal life. You've done some things that have taken you off track. You realized you weren't going to where you wanted to go, and you just made some shifts. Why do you have to be mighty to do that? And let me back it up a little bit if I can, subset it for a second.
Sure.
One of the things the Mosaic, the book that I wrote behind me, talks about, and it's taught me, and silently, it really didn't say it to me, is that the beauty of the ordinary. Like there's nothing more beautiful than a sunrise. It happens every single day, and we know exactly the moment it's going to happen. There's nothing more beautiful than leaves changing color in fall, and seeing those beautiful leaves change color before they sacrifice themselves to the ground. There's nothing more exquisite than seeing buds come onto the branch of a tree or onto a flower. It's all absolutely ordinary. It happens every single year, sometimes every night. Why do we have to be mighty or extraordinary? Why? Because to me, when we try and be extraordinary and people come with all their superpowers or they're mighty, it's an unsustainable reality. Even Superman takes off his cape and sometimes. And it makes us, I think it builds us into a world of never being able to live up to who we think we have to be. And then we have this self-loathing that comes in. Does this make sense to you? Like, I really just want to get, because mighty is your brand, and I love it, I'm not trying to knock it down. I'm trying to understand it, because I love seeing things from other perspectives.
Mm.
So I just want to see your perspective of what mighty means for you. Who cares what I think? I just wanted to put it in that context.
I suppose, well, for me, the mighty moniker as such is it's not egotistical. It's not intended to be. Um, it's, I suppose, for me, realizing that the first half of my life, and I sort of said, well, this is where I am today, and it's like I could follow that trajectory through and saying, well, if I doubled that, then basically that was my so-called lifespan. If I lived the typical age of a male,
Right.
and you kind of go, well, that's all very predictable, and that's great, and like, and people would say to you, do you think you're fulfilling your potential? And I was like, well, no. Do you think that, you found your purpose? And I'm saying, well, no. And I couldn't necessarily tell them what or why or what, but I knew enough to say that I don't know. And really, the sort of the branding came about, really, it was around the Fire in the Belly. I mean, Fire in the Belly is the name of, my show. And, really that's what I like to understand is, what is the fire in the belly? And I think it's down to, it's a nod, or it's an acknowledgement to almost the inner potential that says you have more scope and capacity that I have ever given you, leeway or acknowledgement for. And for that, I'm saying, the mighty is more or less a reminder for me to step up. It's a reminder for me to, to sort of say, listen, you are amazing. It's almost like a self empowerment, and it's a reminder. I take your point very carefully there, that you were saying there is a risk that we set ourselves on a pedestal. But vice versa, I would say, if you're living by your passion, and I've been at sort of stages of burnout, I've had depression, I've had a number of things, but I think when you find what you're supposed to do and it's your passion, it's frictionless.
Yes.
And you actually become, the mightiest form of you. You become the best form of you. It is imperfect, absolutely. Well, that's what makes you unique, thank goodness. And that's how we can move forward. So I don't see it, and it's not intended to be a negative. It's intended to just be a little nod to me to saying, are you fulfilling your potential? Are you acting with integrity? Are you, sort of on your mission and your path? And, you know, are all your goals and, the conversation that I have with people, is it the best that I can be? And
Gotcha.
that's not to put me under pressure. That's just a reminder to go, listen, this is some amazing stuff. And I'm so fortunate to get to speak to the likes of yourself. And, it's like, listen, you got to turn up your A game.
Mirror that, my friend. I'm the one who's fortunate here. I love your humility and the way you say it, and you can feel it. And I want to come back to you a little bit, if I can.
Please.
There's something so beautiful about daytime being daytime. And there's something so exquisite about nighttime being nighttime. I don't think day ever thinks, do I have to be the best version of day that I can be? Nor does night think that I have to be the best version of night that I can be. Just by being themselves, they are what they are, which is beautiful. And probably not in your case, because I don't hear it in any of the syllables that you're saying, and I'm very attuned to resonance of voice and feelings that are hidden and things that are there that people aren't saying, and I don't feel that at all. So I'm really happy that we're having this discussion, because you're really helping me to see it from a different perspective. But thinking we have to be the best version of ourselves all the time is sort of a burden that, why do we need to carry? Why can't we just be ourselves? Why can't being ourselves just naturally put into that we're going to be ourselves the best way we possibly can? Because when you're yourself, I would question that it isn't being ourselves that makes us not good enough. It's trying to be somebody else that makes us not good enough. It's trying to be better than we are that makes us not good enough. It's trying to think that we have this goal up here that we have to constantly achieve, that is unsustainable, that we'll never get to. But when we're just ourselves, it's a beautiful, natural progression. There's no stress, there's no tension. It's just clearly being ourselves. And I would say, from my perspective, just for interesting conversation, because I want you to hit it, lob it back to me, okay? That our problem isn't that we have to be better than we are. Our problem is we have to learn how to be ourselves. When I talk to most people have no idea who they are. And if we could just be ourselves, just our beautifully ordinary self, extraordinary things happen, the Mosaic showed me, when extraordinaries come together. We were never meant to do it alone. What do you think about that?
That really resonates with me on a number of levels. Um, I would often ask people that I meet, and it's a question that has potentially a lot of power, and you have to be very careful. And that's simply a question of saying, do you like yourself and do you love yourself?
Yeah.
And I've found that it's scary, the number of people that cannot answer that question with a yes.
Yeah.
And statistically, if you wanted to put it there, in my finding, it's like 1 in 4. Only 25% of the population will say it.
I
You
bet you're
know,
I bet you're high in your evaluation.
I could be, and that's and
My
that's
my research has shown it's more like 1 in 10.
and is that not scary?
It's completely scary, but I think we live in a world where people are trying to be, where myself isn't good enough, so I have to be the best version of myself. I have to be the exceptional. I have to have superpowers. In America now, I don't know where you live, but in America now, everybody's running around. This is the new trend. What's your superpower? Well, who cares?
Hmm.
I mean, what's your power? What's it like when you connect to yourself and you feel this power just coming through you, because you're actually, there's no opposition to being yourself. You don't have to be better than you are. You don't have to be worse than you are. You don't have to be more than you are. You don't have to be an extraordinary version of who you are. You don't have to be, pardon me, a mightier version of yourself than yourself. There's something so exquisitely beautiful about just being yourself. The mountain doesn't ever want to be the river, and the river doesn't ever want to be the mountain. Daytime might say to nighttime, I want to stay longer. Nighttime doesn't give a darn. It's when it's time for nighttime to come, it comes. It doesn't care if daytime likes it or doesn't like it. It's nighttime's turn. And yet we live with all these preconceived stories in our head that who we are isn't good enough. So we have to be a better version. We have to be a stronger version. We have to be a superpowered version. Pardon me for including mightier in there, a mightier version. Why? Like this person that I'm meeting right now is such an exquisitely beautiful man. He doesn't need to be mightier than he is. You're kind, you're warm, you're vulnerable, you're an open, beautiful, beautiful being. I like the UnMighty version of Pete Lonton more than the mighty version. I haven't met the mighty version. Maybe I'd like him more. I don't know. But I certainly like this version. Does that make sense to you?
It does, and listen, I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be in this conversation. I like to be challenged, and the mighty aspect, like I say, it's something. It's, to me, it's a journey,
Yeah.
and that's
Love it.
something, and I've acknowledged, over the last 3 years, and I've read more books, and the more I know, the more I realize I don't know.
Me too.
And as you said at the very start, I mean, it's almost mind blowing when you look at it, just a single tree, is what's going on in that tree in terms of all the roots and the leaves and the wind and all the internal factors and external factors and everything else. And yet that's just one tree,
One tree.
and, it's, that's the amazing thing. So sort of the more you realize, that there's just so much more out there that we are. And I'm probably careful the way I phrase it, but we're almost powerless.
I don't know what that
We
means.
are just powerless to
Powerless. Are you saying
powerless.
power?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I didn't get that. Okay. I thought you were saying a different word. Okay. Excuse me.
So yeah, I mean, we are spectators more than we are, actual, players as such.
Yeah.
So that's the scary thing, and what the sort of the brand, or the vision I've set out with the last 3 years is kind of saying, well, if you live everything with the idea of just saying, well, what if? And you know, you sort of saying, well, what if I tried something different? What if I had this conversation with Daniel? What if I did this, and what if I did that? And because I believe you only have a right to an opinion on something as if you've tried it.
Yeah.
And opinions are, in this day and age, are a very, very dangerous thing. So, and as you've said, I think it's so powerful that, the power of listening.
Yeah.
And very few people, as you've said, and I've listened to you on other interviews, and there's very few people listen and listen well.
Yeah.
I think it's truly, I know for me, my sort of programs would be quite long, and the interviews, and what I find is, because the eye can't see itself, so actually in that process, people find it incredibly cathartic.
Yes.
And it's saying, well, when is the last time someone took potentially 2 hours to let you speak in a positive way, unjudgmental? You can tell the story you want to tell it. There's no preformed ideas. There's no judge, jury, or executioner. It's your story, and it's your. And then as a witness, my job is simply to actually sort of say, well, I noticed 3 dots here. Is it possible that those dots are connectable? And it's like almost a breakthrough moment generally for people going, I had never actually noticed the pattern.
I love that.
So.
And is that what happens on your podcast? And is your podcast, What is Your Fire in Your Belly podcast? Is that what it's called?
So Fire in the Belly is the podcast. And it is that, I believe, as you've said, I think everyone has something inside them. They have a natural frequency.
Love it.
And a bit like people loving themselves and liking themselves, is there's not many people can actually say what their true passion is, their burning desire, if you like.
Yeah.
And, it's sad in some ways, but then, you know, I I don't like to think of it that way, because at the same time I meet so many people, and the opportunity to talk, and as you're doing, and I love this format, and I love this concept that you're doing here, and
Thank you.
it's great to share that, and yeah, just to get out there and see,
Yeah.
and for me to sit back and say, well, I had 37 and a half years of ideas and opinions and structures and wants and beliefs, and I proved that that's not perfect. In fact, it's a long way from being perfect. And I even have I lost a tooth over the stress of it. So
Wow.
I have the physical markers, and um, so I'm sort of saying, right, well, hold on, we've got to clear the board here. We've got to start fresh, and just start asking the questions. Well, what if I spoke to this person? What if I tried this? And you know, even I say a lot, and it's from that I've really sort of been saying, well, isn't it not time to actually sit back and let the subconscious mind come forward?
Yeah.
Because I keep saying, and it's like, well, blatantly, I don't know, because I'm making the mistakes, but yet part of me knows.
Yeah.
But
A-
it's the part of me that whispers quietly when I'm in the shower or when I'm out for a walk. It's not loud. It's a very quiet speaking inner subconscious. So
Yeah.
I'm really trying to listen, and that's what I'm just trying to learn here, Danny.
I love it. And so you are exactly half the age of me. And I can tell you, I've doubled the mistakes that you've made plus more. Congratulations and keep going. And um, there's so much in what you're saying. That quiet, that stillness, that place that we can only hear if we literally just quiet what's inside of us so that we can actually hear the whisper. That voice to me has never been one that has yelled and got excited and tried to scream at the top of its lungs. It's always been pss, 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 pss. What do you say? Oh, I couldn't hear you. I was talking too much. I'm sorry. What did you say? And sometimes it goes away. Sometimes it comes back. And so having the doors open to our house to allow the visitor that wants to come into us, which is actually ourselves, that we've forgotten is who lives in the house. We treat him like a visitor until we realize, oh my God, he knows my house better than I do. You know, what a beautiful thing to welcome you back into your own home. And that's a lot of the work that I do with people is I reintroduce them to themselves because they've gotten lost in themselves. They've gotten lost in all the noise and all the things and all the being extraordinary and being superpowered and putting on their costumes and their masks and their capes. But let's tuck that away for a little bit. Let's go to another part of it if I can with you. Is that all right?
Sure, of course.
Um, let's go to a little bit of a lightning round. Are you a dog or a cat person?
Dog.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
I'm hoping that and asking this enough to people, there may start to develop a trend where dog people are coffee people and cat people are tea people. But I haven't seen it yet. It just came to me as we were talking but I don't think it's going to be. Um, would you say you're in the box or out of the box?
My initial answer was I am the box.
Okay. I love that.
That's just what flashed forward through my subconscious mind.
So I'm going to have to ask you to unpack that because whenever I get an answer that excites me, I want to know more about it. Like, what does that mean? You are the box.
Well, I think again, and listening to probably recently, well, listening to your own interview and listening to Donald Nielsen, the Conversations with God, and they talk about the universe being within us. So it's
Yeah.
like the universe is both out there but also within us,
Yes.
and ultimately you sort of realize that there is no inside of a box or outside of a box. It's perspective.
Yeah.
And depends, if you're living in the box, then that's outside, and if you're living outside the box, then that's inside. And so
I love it.
you could just say, well, listen, I am the box, and therefore I don't know.
So what I love about that is that the possibility that rather than living in somebody else's reality, like I've never thought about this, I'm just thinking about it as you're saying, that I am the reality of the box that I live in, and I welcome you into my reality. And how powerful that would be if we could walk around as the box and say, I have a lot of room in here to welcome you in. You can welcome in, you can stay outside. The box doesn't have walls to it. You can come and go. It's like an invisible walled box. But I'm going to stay within the confines of who I am until there's reason for me to join up with you and connect. Interesting. I don't even know what I think about it. I just, that's what came to me. Is it? I love that. Um, I think both of these are really important. I just would like to know which one to you is more important right now. Do you think it's more important for you to have a platform where you can speak your voice and be heard? Or do you think it's more important for you to hold the platform for other people to speak their voices and for you to be able to listen to them?
Right now, I am holding the platform for other people to speak.
Wow,
I'm listening.
beautiful. And when you say right now, was there a time where you didn't do that?
Up to 3 years ago, I was the speaker. I was the one that wanted to be at the front of the room or making the most noise. Um, and again, I was closed. I was closed to outside opinion or to other thoughts or other concepts or ideas. And it's only more recently that, like I say, it's kind of going, well, okay, I got this far in my journey, and that's not necessarily where I think I'm capable of going.
Yeah.
So it's time to do something different. What if I didn't do the way I was, and what if I listened? Because the always saying that you get a lot of entrepreneurs, especially that you hear saying is, if I can do it, you can do it. And the ego jumps in and says, well, that's nonsense. That's total rubbish. You're just trying to sell something to me. But what if you were just to take them literally? So this person, whoever it is, just saying, if I can do it, you can do it. Well, what if they meant that?
Yeah.
So then you have to sit back and you've got to look at their journey and saying, well, if that's the case, then how did they get to where they are? And like a tree or any of those, you got to look under the soil. You got to look underneath, because that's where all the business is done, all the hard work, all the toil and slog and everything else to get you to where you are. So, and more so, as our conscious mind and there's the media and everything else out there. It's presents this perfect image, but you don't get to see the sweat and toil that's gone on behind. And
No.
to take people and you've got to assume in some ways, unless they prove otherwise, that this person is telling you what they want to say. So yeah, put it out there. And to me, I believe right now I am an enabler of other people. I would call myself almost a promoter, a silent promoter.
Yeah.
Um, and that's to help people just unlock and find, when they find their fire in their belly, it's like a firework going off. Suddenly it's frictionless. It's years of pent up not knowing, and suddenly can be, it's the spark, it's the ignition that just sets them off, and you just see the progression, and it's like an animal that's just been released into the wild. They just they rocket off into the distance
Absolutely.
because they've suddenly found their calling or their purpose, and suddenly everything's in alignment for them. That's beautiful to watch.
I love that. I love that.
Thank you.
Do you think that you operate more from your head or more from your heart?
I think I'm changing. I'm trying to change. With any questions, and I my wife used to sort of say I was slightly emotionally devoid.
Yeah.
it's like it's like
What every woman says about her man, though, probably. No, I mean, at
yeah,
least at one point.
yeah, it's like if the kids need told off or something functional needs done, daddy gets wheeled in.
Yeah.
But um I'm really trying to listen more, and in terms of even to myself.
Yeah.
And, if someone if asked me to do something, and rather than just instant reacting, which might be, again, a pattern from the past, is actually going, how do I feel about that? And does that resonate with me? And it could be simply that going, actually, no, that's not for me. And having the power to say no, because that's something I've had to learn as well, because, I was a bit of a pleaser, and that was to be seen and things like that. That's how it was a response. So I would say yes to everything. So I think they're really just learning to hear what's going on, and listening to myself. I think that's sort of something that's pretty key, and trying to learn, I think.
I love it. I love this theme that, here's somebody that I don't know, and my whole life is about this idea of listening now. I want to create this revolution where people learn to listen, because I believe that most of the problems that we have in the world today come as a result of just us not listening to each other, listening to ourselves, listening to the world around us, listening to our environment, listening to our businesses. That if we would really just listen, the world tries to help us, to tell us, and it speaks to us first. I have a developmentally delayed daughter. You might have heard this in one of the things if you listen to it, because I normally tell her story. And she's not able to speak like you and I speak. And when she speaks and she doesn't get heard, she raises her voice and says it louder. And sometimes that I'll hear something in the way she raises her voice that's different, but most times not. So now she's just talking louder about something that I don't understand, because it's the clarity of her words that I don't get. And when she doesn't get heard there, then she will throw a tantrum. And when the tantrum doesn't work, she'll attack. She'll come running at me and try and rip my shirt or bite me or do something. And it went on for a long time, Pete, a long time. And finally, in my frustration and my exhaustion, I just said to her, Lisa, I can't do this anymore. I can't. I want to hear you and understand you. I love you so much. I love you more than anything that I've ever loved in my life. And I want to understand you, but I just don't understand your words. Will you find a way to speak to me that's in a way other than those words that you're saying? And in perfect English, she said, I am daddy. And I said, what the heck do you mean I am daddy? What are you talking about? How are you doing that? And she put her finger to the side of her head. And and I understood in that had been putting thoughts into my head all the time. And I had heard those thoughts, but I didn't trust them, because I didn't even know if she was capable of thinking thoughts that deep. And as soon as I said, you little son of a gun, have you been putting thoughts in my head? She just laughed with me, and we laughed contagiously for about 10 minutes. And from that moment on, she never yelled, she never tantrumed, and she never attacked, because she knew I would receive her thoughts. She found a way to communicate to me.
Mm.
Well, I think the world, our bodies, our families, our friends, our businesses, our health, all are doing the same thing. And the pattern in every single case is the same: speak, yell, tantrum, destroy. And so I think listening is the most important thing that we could do now in the world that we live in. And I think it would end most of the problems we have, or start to get us in the right direction. What do you think?
I mean, that is so powerful, and I think there's listening and there's hearing. And I mean, I'm playing about with the theory that, you know, to sit down and speak to someone for around 2 hours, and, like I say, in that safe environment, and to truly listen to them. And it's not just the words, it's the way they're saying it, and it's the context and everything else. I mean, I believe that it would be a life-changing experience, and a bit like what you've just described with, with your daughter. It's that. I mean, I've young twins, 1.5-year-old twins, and I have a
Wow.
3-year-old, and they're at the stage when they can't speak a language as such. They can't use words, but by God, do they communicate?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they're not getting their message across or whatever, you know about it, and especially the 3-year-old. We're at they call them a three-nager.
Yeah.
She's but it's amazing whenever you can, if you sit down and you change gear and you sit down and you try and diffuse it to saying, well, listen, let's just take it down a notch here, and remove the excess emotion, because you've just you're extrapolating it because, as you mentioned there, it's saying, as long as you're not hearing me, so I'll say it louder until you do hear me, and you keep cranking up the volume until eventually it's the same message,
Yeah.
but just frustration has layered over the top. So
Yeah.
it's incredibly powerful, and thank you for sharing it.
Absolutely. Some of the biggest boardrooms in our country have listened to that description and then have applied the practice of listening, and in an afternoon have changed the culture of their company.
Hmm.
I mean, it's just amazing. So I work with government leaders who do the same thing, and it's just amazing how powerful the practice is. So, for those of you who are listening here to this conversation, may I invite you to start a practice of listening, because a practice of listening is so powerful. What makes you happy?
Now it's I think it's growing myself, listening, connecting with more people, um, unlocking other people, which in turn is unlocking me.
Yeah.
That's, for me, finding, the whole fire in the belly concept. That is something, when people say, what's my fire in the belly? It's like, well, my fire in the belly is the Fire in the Belly project,
Yeah.
the show.
Yeah.
Um, speaking to other people. And I've got excited about some really random stuff. People that they're passionate about. It could be anything from, demolition to making tea cozies to, being a boardroom director, whatever. But when they speak with passion, and that they are, that, this is not just a sales speak, it is deep to their
Yeah.
core, it's infectious. And suddenly I come off the interview and I'm like, well, I've inherited the energy, and I'm sitting here
Yes, of
going,
course.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm that person too. It's like, no, hold on, I need to have a coffee because I'm not that person.
I love it.
But again, and helping people to see those dots, I mean, listen, I'm so fortunate. So how it came into my life, I do not know.
Yeah.
If you believe in a higher purpose, if you believe in that, and I mean, I actually believe in it. It was in a moment of silence, and a moment that it was a pretty low point in my life, and it was very much a turning point. Some may call it a midlife crisis, some may call it, whatever you want. But I just believe it was sort of brought to me as for me to almost be the messenger for that, and ultimately I believe it'll be something far bigger than me, and that's great.
Love it. Someone said something to me once, and I just want to run this by you to see if it's true for you. It was certainly true for me. And we were talking about my desire to listen to the world. And they said, it's interesting, you have that desire. Have you felt listened to in your life? And I said, probably not. And have you felt, so what I learned from that was the passion that we have to introduce to the world is really a passion that we have to introduce ourselves. That's something that we've always wanted, and we've always wanted to feel. Would it be fair to say, when you looked at your life and saw it not moving in the way you wanted, that you developed a fire in your belly that became so powerful that you just want to share that beautiful moment with other people by hearing their fire in their belly moments?
Yeah, I mean, that rings true for me too. It's there's so few people are listened to in general, but I think, there's, even with listening, it's, if you just say to someone, just talk to me, speak to me, and it takes a while. It's a bit like a blocked hose. It takes a while to clear everything out, because at first, if you just give them an open rein just to speak, you're going to get all sorts of garbled messages, and everything's going to come out. But like anything, and it's a form of therapy in a way. But you got to me anyway, you have to put conditions on it, and saying that this is all going to be done in a positive fashion. This is all, we're looking back to see what we can sever to allow us to propel forward.
Yeah.
My best adage that I've ever sort of been able to work out, it's a bit like buying a Tesla or a really fancy car and driving it around town, but with the handbrake on. And it's
Mhm.
like, it's a great car, but until you let the bloody handbrake off, you know, it's always going to be screeching and, you know, doing damage to itself. It's like we're all that, you know, we are just amazing, and the potential within us is great, except we get in our own bloody way and leave our own handbrake on, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Great example.
it's just trying to, yeah. So to listen, but I think in the right way.
Yeah.
And if people haven't been listened to in a while, and it's a bit like you mentioned with your daughter, is, you know, unfortunately it comes out wrong, and people, they miscommunicate then, not intentionally, but they just miscommunicate because they've almost, they're trying to make up for lost time of not being listened to.
Totally. What I watch is when she goes from yelling to tantruming and from tantruming to attacking, she isn't really trying to say her point anymore. It's just now she's so caught in the frustration of it. She's just looking for attention. And maybe when she gets attention, she'll try again to state the point, but she almost needs to get attention. If you look at what's happening in America now with race protests and looters and, you know, things like that that are happening. If you look at what's happening around the world, coronavirus, it's almost as if the world itself is saying, hey, like, take a pause here. The whole world is taking a pause. What do you need? Like, what do you, how much will you continue to fill me with your poison before you expect me to stand up and protect myself, you know, and just say, take a pause here. Like, let's take a look at what's going on. I don't know if that's what it's saying or not, but it's one way that I look at it for myself. Do
I
you
think,
think?
I mean, coronavirus will probably save more lives than it will take,
Yeah,
because it has forced people to slow down.
yeah,
It's forced people to look, to speak, to make a decision. That suddenly it's, you know, when everyone has almost a couple of days off school, it's amazing how you get to, you know, reset and reassess. And like I say, that there's lives will be saved by coronavirus, ironically,
I love
you
that.
know.
I love that. Do you think people are more different than they are alike, or more alike than they are different?
That's an interesting question. I think, well, I think everyone is completely unique, but at our core we all probably vibrate at a very similar frequency. But depending on where you are in terms of your awareness, your attitude to listening, your, you know, your environment, your circumstances, um and I think as well, I mean, the ego I would imagine wants to think that it's unique in itself. So we want to feel unique, but maybe we are the same. I don't know. I've just talked myself into a circle there, but
I do it all the time. It's interesting, but it's an interesting place to be when we're not 100% sure of what we actually believe when we start to engage the possibility that we could believe something else. And it's there's something beautifully chaotic in that moment that allows for something more real than what we thought was real to become real. In my book, The Mosaic, one of the big things that happens is when he asks the adults where his parents are because his parents passed away, and they tell him they're in heaven, and he meets these different people, and he wonders why he's meeting these people, but he listens to them, and he realizes that how he saw these people from far away isn't at all how he sees them now after spending a few minutes with them. And he realizes he doesn't see the world that exists. He sees the world that he sees exists. And he wonders what would happen if I got out of my way and could actually see the world that does exist without my interpretation on it. And it's a beautiful moment for us to think about, like, what world do we really see? Do we see the world we see, or do we see the world that is?
we are the box.
We are the box. I like that. I like that.
Well, being the box, you get to look inside and outside, because, you know, it's perspective, really.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a bit like you were saying, the story of that boy. It's again, it's, you know, you want to have preconceived ideas, and, you know, there's heaven and contact and things like that, and there's so much going on, but it's whatever we choose to tell ourselves it is, but that doesn't mean that that's what it is. It's what we've told ourselves.
So let me ask you this because it just came to me. As you said, we are the box again. How about if there is no box? How about instead of being the box where we can look inside and outside, there's no box that prevents us from being either inside or outside? How about if there is just what is?
That's quite possible.
Okay.
I think it's yeah, it's like the conversation of saying the universe is on the eye of a needle, and
Yeah.
you know, where, where do you want to go with that?
Where are you going to take it? Exactly.
I
Um,
think you have to draw a line in the sand. So I'll stick with
somewhere.
I'll stick with the box for now.
You got to stay in the box. Okay. Um, in a world that clearly is at disarray, if you look at it, we had the Me Too movement a few years ago that really reevaluated the way men looked at the way they looked at women. And I hope it actually helped women look at the way they are with men too. I don't know if it did or not. And I could get in trouble for saying that, but it's okay. Because I think we all have to take responsibility for how we show up and what power does for us and how we respond to it. Um, in the world of coronavirus, where even our acts of kindness and our ability to just want to hold each other and hug each other and caress each other and greet each other, we're being now shimmied away from each other and not able to do that right now because of the possibility of what could spread between us. And then in the Black Lives Matter movement and the idea of watching what people of color have had to put up with people of white and seeing how those all those things are changing us. Do you think the world is trying to tell us something?
Yeah. Um, I think probably first of all the fact that we have to wear a mask tells us that actually it's almost a universe saying stop talking.
Yeah, I love it.
It's like, keep your words to yourself. I Again, so much comes down to perception, and unfortunately, I think when you take ego and you take beliefs and you take expectations and different values, etc., I don't know that we always hear a clear picture.
Yeah,
And no matter the story around the world, etc., the problem is everyone, and again, it's a bit like with your daughter. They're sort of shouting louder and louder, and they've kind of lost the point.
yeah,
And it's and it escalates and escalates, and it's kind of going, well, hold on here, what are we even arguing about?
exactly.
And it's just bizarre. And I mean, a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with a man, and we sort of got down to it late one night, and we were saying, right, well, what is the difference between being a Catholic and being a Protestant? And by the time we got down to the nuts and bolts of it, and you're saying there's not a whole goddamn lot.
Right, right,
And I was
right.
like, does it really justify everything
Yeah,
over a few sort of, and I'm not gonna I'm not gonna start getting into the detail of it, but
right.
sometimes you go on, do you even know what you're shouting about?
Yeah,
And okay, is it the word you're using? Are you trying to say something, or is this sort of looking for significance, or is it the values, or what is it? So I there's a lot of it I don't attach to. I think because it's either being politicized, and I think there's ulterior motives there as well. So,
yeah,
unfortunately, by the very fact of some of these causes, I think they accelerate themselves to being inert. I think unfortunately they lose their own message simply by the fact of what you have to do is you have to shout louder. Which again, my mother used to say, if you shout, you've lost the conversation.
100%.
You know.
Pete, we're winding down. Take 1 minute or less. What would you say to the world? A world that's listening, a world that wants to hear something. What would be the message that you would deliver in 1 minute to them?
I think for me, it's, you have an amazing and unbelievable potential within you. Take the time to find that. We all have a burning passion, a burning desire within us. We have a fire in the belly, and it's, cut out the noise and slow down enough to actually let yourself hear that whisper. We've talked about that whisper, and unfortunately, that whisper doesn't speak loudly and it doesn't repeat itself. So finding out what you really want to do, and when you do that, you get into a flow state. And flow, as it sounds, is a point of low resistance. It's easy, it's joyful, it's everything. So if you can find your flow, you find out what you really love to do, and listen to the language. I'd love to do that, but I can't. I'd love to do this, but I can't. Or I used to love doing this, but X, Y, and Z. So find your flow. That would be the one thing I'd say to you. And it's take the time. And I know for me, I'm on a journey, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We're all exactly where we are supposed to be.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. And if people are as intoxicated with you as I am and want to find you, how would they go about doing that?
So we've got the Fire in the Belly podcast, and I'd invite you on. I'd love to have you on, Danny, at some point.
Accept it for sure.
Perfect. So yeah, the Fire in the Belly podcast on all the usual platforms. So yeah, that's us.
And will you do me a favor, if you have a website and you have social media links, will you send those to me so I can put them in the show notes?
Sure.
I want to thank you, Pete, Mighty Pete, fire in the belly, Pete, for being here with me today, for taking this time to share with yourself so completely, vulnerably, honestly, to not only speak about listening, but I watched you listen. I watched me push up against some things you were saying, and there was no pushback. It was beautiful to watch. And I always admire when people can do that, because the world's going to push us in some ways. And the question is, do we push back and sort of shove our way back into what we believe? Or do we remain open and listen? And I hope I'm like you in the regard that I just want to listen to what the world's saying to me. I want to push to hear what it says if I don't understand it, but then I want to walk away listening, because when I listen, I learn so much more than when I speak. I know what I already think. But there's a beauty in listening to what somebody else thinks and hearing another point of view, hearing another perspective, seeing exactly the same thing I always looked at from a slightly different angle. It makes it more beautiful. It makes it more special. It makes it more sacred. So for those of you who want to know more about Pete, get on that Fire in the Belly podcast, subscribe to it, listen to it, participate in it. Pete, I want to thank you again for being here. In closing, is there one last thing you haven't been able to say really quickly?
No, I'm just delighted to be here, and I thank you for being you.
It's my absolute honor. For those of you who come and listen to the show all the time, I can't thank you enough for your support. Please start to share these with people. These conversations, this Zoom room is like magic to me. We come in as strangers and we leave as friends. Like this man right in front of me, I would love to know more about him. I would love to be his friend. I would love to see what we can do together. And stranger things have happened than meeting a stranger in a magic room and deciding you want to do some work together or do some things together and watch how that happens. Allow yourself the possibility. And if you can, and you can, start up a conversation with somebody you don't know. Just see what happens. Who knows? It doesn't have to be one magic Zoom room and called the Zoom room of Danny Levin. There are going to be thousands and thousands of them. And I believe if that spread happens, we'll live in a world where we'll understand each other better and love each other more. So again, Pete, thank you for being here. What an honor. And thank you, folks, for joining us. Until next time, don't be a stranger. Ciao.